learning how to judge hort crops and horticulture exhibits at county fairs. And so we made the arrangements to have Jim Shrefler come up and talk about that topic today. So Jim, pleasure to have you.
Okay, nice to be here. I guess it's more than a month ago that they, invited me to come up and present here at this in-service training, and I was delighted to have the invitation and all that, and began thinking about it right then. Over the years I've taken pictures at different fairs of the horticulture contest exhibits and things like that. And so I had in my mind, just what I'd discuss, and then as the time started getting closer and closer, as any good extension specialist does, you call your colleagues, you got a talk ready on this topic? and I'm glad I did, because Dr. Shelley Mitchell in the horticulture department, and I guess she talked here last year, but a lot of you folks probably weren't here then, and she talked on a similar subject. Like I said, I'm glad I did, because I don't want to cover the exact same thing in the same way. And I've used a little bit of what she did here, and I think since some of you, her presentation was really good, since some of you folks are new, I'm going to check and see if she agrees to make that available. Now that I have that one sheet handout, one of the things on there is a website link to the Southeast District, something or other website, but my presentation is on that site, so you're free to pull it down and use it in any way you wish for your own use. Pictures in and whatever. So, but I'll check with Shelley, and if she agrees, I'll go ahead and put hers up there also, so you can have it available. I've been here about 19 years now. Time went fast, and I've really enjoyed it. But one of the things that my job description didn't say anything about was judging horticulture crops. I talked about working with county extension educators, county agents at that time, and growers, and doing applied research and all that. It didn't say anything about judging crops at the fairs, but I guess I started in June, and a couple months after I got there, I got a couple calls, invited to judge the crops at probably Pontotoc County Fair and things like that, and kind of made me feel good, be a judge at horticulture crops. After about a year or two of that, I realized you got to be careful when you answer the phone beginning about June or so. You can see who's calling. No, I'm joking. I enjoy doing this. I'm looking forward to every year. So, here in the U.S., of course, agriculture in this part of the country is a prime example. Has been extremely important for many, many years here. And even though bigger farms and things like that, you still, you may see a big wheat farm or something, but you often see a vegetable garden there up close to the house and things like that. And people take pride, in U.S. in general, rural people take pride in growing vegetables, and I don't know what all the reasons for that. We have vegetable judging contests at the county fairs and things like that. But I imagine partly, it's partly probably because of that. Everybody, I've got first tomatoes this year, I've got the biggest pumpkin or what have you. But again, you just see a lot of things. And this is farmers market, and one of the farmers market in Tulsa. There's folks that do a very good job of growing heirloom tomatoes, which is not an easy thing to do. This gentleman, he's a cattle rancher and peanut grower, and watermelon grower from down in Bennington along the Red River. And he's not doing too much farming now. He's getting up in years and all that, but he brought in these sweet potatoes. I guess last year it probably was, but when people can accomplish something like that, it really something that makes you feel proud and all that. And again, this fellow down in the lower right, a watermelon grower in Valiant, Oklahoma. He's recently retired, but high school teacher, and he grew 100 or so acres of watermelon every year. Has a packing shed and all like that. And just kind of on the side though, he tried to grow this Carolina Cross, I guess, a variety, but their watermelons will get real big, so he always grows some of those. Vegetables, around the world are extremely important in people's diets, and for many people, it's a matter of survival. And to be able to grow your produce and things like that, you'll have. And again, this is up in Guatemala here. Some of the OSU extension specialists have worked down there with some folks in southeastern Guatemala. Really poor area, dry area, and all that. But for these people, when we worked with it, set up drip irrigation, showed them how to be able to grow vegetables. I mean, it was almost a sacred thing when they realized that they could do that and grow a lot of food. Before, I mean, pretty much their diet is corn and beans, and they like this stuff, but it wasn't accessible to them. So, when you start getting to where you're beginning to grow in a larger volume and things like that, and quality, and looking at taking the markets, then it becomes important to start thinking about, what is going to be acceptable to that market. You may grow some nice tomatoes and all that, but if they've got spots on them and things like that, you may not be able to sell them. So quality and presentability and all that becomes important when you start, getting into marketing your crops and things like that too. So, well, there's a couple different things. You may be involved with horticulture crop judging in several different arenas. One is, of course, the annual county free fairs and all, and then the state fairs and things like that. So you're probably going to be involved in, and you may not do the judging. Well, you may be invited to a neighbor county to do it, the judging, or you may be responsible for finding people who can do the judging in your own county. And just a couple of things I think is important there. When you pick judges and train them and all that, it's important that whatever the guidelines are for your particular county, that the judge is aware of that and they follow those guidelines when they do the judging. And unfortunately, from one county to the next, it differs, as far as the number of specimens you should have on a plate, or if they should be on a paper plate or a plastic plate or whatever. So, I don't know where that all comes from. It'd be nice if there's more consistency there, but be sure that you if you're judging or you're training judges, it's only fair to the people that bring in entries to the contest to be judged and all that you follow the guidelines. Some of the things that you should really be important, they should meet the basic guidelines of the specimen quantity, how they're presented, whether it's on a plate or whatever in a basket, the type or color. And if these basic things are not met, in different counties do different things, but definitely they should, as far as I'm concerned, they shouldn't be eligible for a first place or blue ribbon. In a lot of cases, maybe just disqualified. And that'll be a judgment call for your particular situation. Some of the this is a part of what Dr. Mitchell presented last year. Some of the traits to be judged when it comes to produce, things like, and this is all pretty much straightforward. When you look at the sample, you're going to see cleanliness, free of injury, no finger holes poked in it. Is it mature in prime eating condition? Uniformity from one sample to another, shape and that sort of thing. True to type. If it has if it says cherry tomatoes and they've just got some regular tomatoes that are just a little bit small or something, that's not right. And then labeling as far as the correct class, summer squash or winter squash or what have you. So any of these, are pretty reasonable samples there as far as uniformity and color. I put this one in here just as an example of extreme. Here we have several different hot peppers, but some of them are a jalapeno and some are a hot banana pepper, different colors. So that's the kind of things that really take away from and lower the sample or the entry as far as how it should be judged, how well it should be judged or ranked. Okay. Kind of, again, from Dr. Mitchell's material, kind of a general approach to take to doing the judging is look at all your samples. There may be just 2 or 3, but there may be 15 or more. So it can be, when it gets to be a lot, it can be challenging. But again, first think of what should the ideal specimen look like. All right, and then look them over. Think how the different samples depart from that ideal specimen. Thinking about some of the factors that are making the thing useful. Number one, would you eat this? Would you eat whatever this is on the plate? If it really looks immature or what have you, anything about it just doesn't look like it's appetizing. That's going to detract from how well it's going to be ranked. Anyhow, you can start off. It's usually pretty easy to pick the best and the worst and get those out of the way. So you have your what will be probably your first place blue ribbon, and then last place, which may or not get any sort of ribbon. But then you got to start looking at the rest of them and rank them in the middle to find out how you rank the bunch of it. And like I said, when you get 15 or so samples of something like okra or peppers, it can take some time. So don't feel like you better be rushed to do it. Take your time. Just kind of several samples here to look at. Of course, and these are already laid out as far as how Dr. Mitchell had ranked them. Okra, of course, here, number 1, number 2, 3, and 4. Kind of what you see there. What stands out first is the uniformity. They're all about the same length. They've all been cut the stem has been cut off, the peduncle cut off, all at about the same length, all nice and straight. And tapered uniformly at all. When you go to the other extreme, for example, see now number one here, and this can be with okra, it can be kind of tricky too. But these are definitely immature. Their okra should be a little bit larger than that to be too big. They can get tough on some varieties, but that's getting kind of small. So that would lower the sample at that size. And in addition, you have some differences in the length of the stem that was cut off. Now with the 3 and 4, it gets to be a little bit more more difficult. We have some differences again in the stems. We have that in both of them. There's no stem left on that one. But we also have some discoloration there and things like that. So again, you kind of just in your mind got to look at all these factors and kind of I guess it's kind of that's something about the human mind that you can look at things and just something tells you in there. This you can combine those several different features in how well they look in each one and kind of make a decision there. So almost difficult to explain that. Now, another one that can be pretty tough is these cherry tomatoes. And I mean, what do you do when you get 5 plates of cherry tomatoes and they're all look pretty good? There's no stem on them, no blemishes on them. Where do you start? Sometimes what you got to do is look really close. If 1 or 2 just has a little insect peck or something like that, that's gonna knock it down on the lid. So. I think another thing too is the presentation with something like this. To me, it looks better if it would be on a smaller plate rather than a couple little tiny fruits on a huge plate there. So that presentation is another factor that you can take into account. Some habanero peppers, and I think if her intention was 1, 2, 3, and 4, I think I disagree on these. These have some decay on them there, and I really. Again, unless it's something that looks like somebody dropped it after it got to on the table or something. If there's some decay that's already advanced like that, I really pull things down because of that. Because that's poor selection practices. So again, these can be tough. They all have the stems. All the stems are curled, so you pick the ones that have the stems that are curled worst on the same plate. It also have some that are straight. But like I said, just gotta kind of look at them and make that decision. Okay. One thing, like I said, you often run into difficult decisions there. And like I said, okra, I've spent probably 20 minutes looking at a table of 20 okra plates, and you lay them all out, and then you look at them, and then, no, that's not right, and you go start over again like that. But again, you just got to start looking at all those, first those initial, more obvious things. Are they cut off uniformly? Are they cut cleanly? If some were cut, but a little bit of the tissue on the stem was torn when they were cut, you can start separating them because of that, or dropping them down because of that. Another thing is there's different varieties of okra. Of course, the common one, which would be Clemson spineless and emerald green and all that, are pretty much the standard appearing okra. But some of these other ones that they're short and stubby. And they just, they'll look normal, but they're actually very good okra, just less well known, and something like that might be a very good sample. But if you're not familiar, if the judge is not familiar with it, they might knock it down just because they're lacking familiarity. Things like, we get some years down in southeast Oklahoma when the only thing you find at the fair is pears and okra, for example. There's a lot of those and nothing else. And when you get these pears, they always have some sooty mold on them, so they're not nice and like the pears you see in the grocery store and all that. That doesn't mean they're not good. So you've got to take that into account. If you're seeing some things like that are just you might call it blemish, but just something natural, and it's there across the board. You're going to just kind of have to look at that, and again, look for uniformity. If some have some of those blemishes and others don't, I think I would take off for that more than a plate that all had a little bit of blemishes, a uniform amount of blemish on each sample. Same thing when it comes to presentation. Several small items in a small plate to me looks better than just a couple little tiny tomatoes on a large plate. Another tough one here. All these are gourds. It's all in the same, in this particular fair, they were all in the same class. How do you begin to compare and pick the number one out of all of these when you've got three completely different things, apples, oranges, and bananas, So, again, look at sometimes with some of these I forget what they call them, these birdhouse corn or stuff. Sometimes some of those will be mature and some will be green, so you can knock them down like that. But some of them are just unusual and they have a neat appearance and all that. So, but again, it's just one of those things you have to make a call on. Another tough one, a lot of times, people are really impressed by size. A giant tomato, a giant watermelon, what have you. So when you have something like this, now this is the largest one here. It looks pretty good, but it's really not real nice, nicely shaped and all that. Whereas this smaller pumpkin, it's really almost a perfect shape and all that. So again, what are you gonna make that decision? Now that one's you can pull that one out because it looks like it's kind of immature. Another tough one is when you get a lot of nice pumpkins varying in size. You don't want to judge them just on size, but you got to start looking at things like are there any spots on them or blemishes or insect damage marks on them? Has the stem been cut nice and neatly? What is the appearance of the stem? Is it a straight? Is the handle on it straight, or does it have a nice curve to it? Well, again, we also have difficult years. Like I said, we have some years down in southeastern Oklahoma when it's just hot, and about the only thing you're going to find in the fair is if anything, is maybe some oak or maybe some watermelons, and hot peppers. There's bell peppers, not so much, but hot peppers will do pretty well in hot weather too. So. I guess another thing is thinking, and when you have those difficult, if you know that just nobody has tomatoes, and then you have a couple entries that are, maybe not the best looking tomatoes, but the fact that they were able to grow some tomatoes and bring them to the fair, that they've made an accomplishment. It may be a tomato that in a good year would no way get a blue ribbon. But if you know that everybody else is really had a hard time that year, and this person was able to at least produce something that's reasonable and looks like it'd be edible, I would oftentimes give that still. Give it a blue ribbon if that's what there's to compare it to. There's also some characteristics that, for people that aren't real familiar with vegetables, can be confused with things that are blemishes. Again, on jalapenos, there's a lot of markets that jalapenos that have these striations on them. That's something that kind of really bumps it up as far as the quality. So if you're seeing those in samples, the thing to look at. If they have some that have striations and other don't, you have a lack of uniformity there, so that might bring it down. But if you have all the samples have that striation there, and they're good samples otherwise and all that, that could be a big plus for it. Again, with the heirloom tomatoes, they're tricky in that they're not that nice tomato like you see on nice uniform round with no spots on it. They just naturally have some, I don't know if you call it zippering or cat facing, but that's just the nature of the beast in this case. So you've got to take that into account also. And then this is a watermelon variety that often referred to as stars and stripes, or moon and stars, moon and stars. And actually what it is, it has a virus infection, but it's that they can, in the breeding program, that virus stays in the melon and all that, and it's considered a variety. It's sold as that variety there, so important to be aware of those things. Now, of course, you folks are also involved in livestock judging, and I really I enjoy watching when they're doing some of the judging some of the different animals and all that. A lot of skill and a lot of training and a lot of diligence goes into to doing a good job with this. And with vegetables, it's not all that difficult. So if you haven't done it yet, or if you're had a little bit of experience and you're feel uncomfortable about it, the vegetables are not, in produce, are just not going to be that difficult as learn how to judge animals carefully. But again, there's no reason you can't put some effort into learning. I think when it comes to working with youth, in 4-H programs and train them in judging, I think that's a really good skill to be teaching youth. And partly, are they going to be spending their life judging produce and things? Maybe not, but at the time in young people's lives, if they can get them to sit still long enough to pay attention and look at the different characteristics of the samples of different flowers or what have you and all that, I think that's a really good experience for them to think about, when you look at something and kind of judge the quality of it, what are all the different factors that might be there that influence that quality? One publication that's very, are you all familiar with this already? Okay, but I think, and I'll be honest with you, I've kind of glanced at it over the years and all that, and one good thing about preparing for this, I sat down and read through it a little more carefully this time. But some of the, it's been Dr. Doug Needham, and he was here when I started here at OSU. He's now with the Longwood Botanical Gardens in I guess Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which is a very prestigious and very well-known internationally botanical garden with excellent educational programs and all that they have. But he was the one who prepared this, and it still continues to be a very important training manual and all that. But he starts off talking about the general evaluation criteria for horticulture crops: symmetry, uniformity, proportion, showiness. So these are all just kind of general guidelines, regardless whether you're working with flowers or ornamental plants or vegetables or fruits. These, that's one thing to be thinking about, these different types of aspects. And showiness, when it comes to flowers, it's partly appearance, but when it comes to vegetables and fruits, think about, is this whatever this product is it mature and ready for the market? Is it something I would pick up and put in my shopping cart? Again, a lot of people think size is important and all that. So, of course, in many cases it is. But I think you also want to be careful to focus on some of these other traits and characteristics that are important in judging. It's actually just a miniature wagon.
It's the angle of the picture. Yeah. Good call, Photoshop.
Now this is just a few pages I excerpted out of the.
Where did you say we could get that?
I think I put the link on the sheet that I handed out there.
Oh, okay.
I did not. One thing I know the past several years, and I'll encourage you folks to, if you work with young people that are interested in this, or you can get interested. For the past several years, I've got the honors of organizing in the Arkansas-Oklahoma State Fair, the horticulture judging contest, and it's really, I guess we had a better turnout this year. I think we probably had 25 or 30 young people participate. But again, are y'all familiar with that fair? I know some of you have been out there. If you're newer in the area in the program, keep aware of that. It's the counties mostly in the eastern part of Oklahoma, east central part of the state, that have kids that participate. And actually in the 4-H part of the program, there's essentially no kids from Arkansas that participate. So and we do it based on the guidelines and all that are used for judging here in Oklahoma. But I think it's a really good opportunity a place to take the kids to get some experience and practice judging that fair. But anyhow, I've had the opportunity to do that. So I just want to point out a couple things. So like I said, the main 4 points that Dr. Needham points out as being important is symmetry, uniformity, proportion, and showiness. So again, if you start thinking about those things, that'll help you get focused on how to begin approaching your judging. And again, I'm kind of being redundant here, but start off by looking at all your samples and identify the best or the first entry of all the different entries that are there. Next, pick out that worst one, and that'll leave you with the ones in the middle. And if there's just 2 or 3, it might be easy. If there's 10 or 12, a little more difficult. But by taking that approach, it'll simplify things for you. The scoring, like I said, I've been working with that contest, and I've sat down and they showed me how to do the scoring using the Hormel charts and all that. And I'd have to study it, some to be able to explain that, but there's no need to explain it. I guess it's used with some of the livestock and all. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you all are familiar, guys and ladies are familiar with it. But that's at that contest we do use that. So. It's not just fruits and vegetables. That's what I've had more of my experience with. But again, potted plants and nursery stocks are important. And again, some of the general guidelines, when it comes to symmetry and uniformity, proportion. Good form. Does it have a nice strong stems or weak spindly stems? That would, things like that. Are the plants centered in the plot, or is the plant planted off to the side of the plot, or is it right in the center? Good color. Is there absence of insect or disease, damage to the plant, and all things like that? So you get the idea. If it's a foliage plant, foliage plant means foliage. It means it shouldn't have flowers on it. So you have to have a foliage plant that's also flowering. With a few exceptions there, that would be something you might take away from it. And flowering potted plants, again, blemishes on the flowers and things like that. Flowers that should have been cut off and removed that are passed and things like that would knock it down. We don't deal with too much of these, but things like mums, you might come across. Mums would be one at that time of year. That oftentimes what those will be is there'll be 8 or so plants in a given pot, and they've been pruned carefully as they were developed to have a nice form, nice kind of dome shape to them and things like that. So those are some of the different characteristics. That overall form is going to be very important in that case. Cut flowers, and I really haven't done too much of these, but I've started the past couple of years. I helped judge at the Potawatomi County Fair, and they've got several people in there that bring, I bet they had 50 samples of cut flowers and all, so that was kind of a new experience, and I kind of slipped away, and y'all know Justin McDaniel? Kind of let him do that, and he did a really good job, so he's not the kind of guy you'd think would be a flower judge. But again, looking at it and thinking all that, it's not all that difficult. Again, fruits, similar to vegetables, good form, uniformity, freedom from blemishes, and at least blemishes that you're not seeing on all the different individuals in the sample. Do they have the right number? If it's several fruits on a plate, etc. And vegetables, we talked about quite a bit of that already, but good form and size appropriate, color important, and there's some things, some things like peppers, for example. Some of them start off green, and as they mature, they turn red. So if you may have some that have a little bit of variation there. Again, take that into account. It's not that they put 2 different peppers from 2 different plants there. If that particular variety is just one that has that transition, if they're all showing a little bit of transition, that's fine. And I think we touched on these. Things like sweet potatoes, they're tough, but uniformity, lack of blemishes, freedom of blemishes, freedom of soft spots and things like that. Freedom from there's some different insects that may grow into the tube. We're so free of that also. And then nuts is another one. Pecans in particular important. So you kind of in there, they're tough. They're tough. How do you look at a plate of 50 pecans? Several plates of 50 pecans that all pretty much kind of look the same, but you got to look carefully. In fact, I helped Wayne the other day they had a contest there, and there weren't a whole lot of samples, but and they didn't look bad, but I kind of had to look at them real carefully. And in one of the samples, there were a few that just had some pretty minor blemishes, but that was enough to decide which was the best of the show and not. So. And I think that's all I have, so if there's time left, and I can address any questions.
Any questions for Jim?
So, Dr. Shrefler, you endorsed Justin as a good judge, so I guess I was invite him up.
Pardon? He did a good job. We kind of did it together, but he.
He's
an apprentice.
If you need his contact information, let us know.
Any more questions? Besides the question about Justin being a flower giver.
And if
You bet.
have a minute left? Let me make a plug for, we've been for a couple years now doing a monthly horticulture in-service training using the Adobe Connect system. And it got started because my boss, Claude Bess, I guess you visited with him yesterday. We were trying to find ways that we could, a lot of you folks, horticulture, you get a lot of horticulture calls, but it's a different call. It's a different topic every time you get a call. So just how do you deal with getting trained to deal with so many different diverse things that are not a main part of your focus in your clientele's needs and all in the county. So we started anyhow. We did a little bit of needs assessment and all that. I came up with the idea of trying to use the, actually when we started it was the Centra system. Unfortunately the Adobe Connect that we're using now works a whole lot better. But we started doing this monthly meeting, and we're getting really good participation from the specialists in the entomology department, horticulture department, and even occasionally from another department, and some of the folks out in the state. Kenda's participates. Kenda here? Oh, okay. I thought you saw you. Yeah, she's participating in all that. It's working really well. You know, it gives a variety of people a chance to talk about things that they're passionate, they really know about. It doesn't take, you know, it's 2 hours, less than 2 hours of your time. If you haven't looked at it yet, I suggest you get on 1 month and give it a try and see. But I think you'll find that it'd be really beneficial. And one thing we really try and do is if there's some emerging topic or something that just, and one example is crepe myrtle. There's I guess an aphid is now, or scale insect, excuse me, that's kind of been moving into southern Oklahoma and really devastating the crepe myrtle. So we're able to get that information out to people real quickly, and have somebody that knew about it talk about it. So, like I said, I invite you to participate in that. And like I say, that you can receive in-service credit for participating, whether you participate live or whether you look at the playback afterwards. So, but if you have any questions on that, let me know.
Give Dr. Shrefler a hand. Well, if Scott Clausen has promised he'll give a set of reasons on that set of tomatoes up there if I give you a 5-minute break. So if you can take a 5-minute break. Besides, Thimble needs a break anyway. He can't stay away.
Scott, do you want to hear Siri?
I've never given a set of reasons in my life.
You bet. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, you will too.
I was glad to see you're on the program. I was glad to see you're on the program. Good.
I'd already talked to them. I'm putting nothing out there. We're here, so that was I explained kind of admin. I said, we're too early.
I had that.